You ever watch smoke rise over a canyon ridge at dawn? It looks almost peaceful until you remember what's underneath it. Fire doesn't sleep. Out here, neither do we. My name's Owen. I'm 38. These days, they call me Longview, a call sign left over from the old crew days when we still did man-tower watches. Now, I run a mobile drone patrol unit crawling along the Cascadia Fire corridor, tucked inside an aging Forest Service truck with more antennas than horsepower. It was just past 6 when the first alarm buzzed, routine heat scan from Zone Delta 9. I blinked off sleep, sitting in the cab half bent over a cracked tablet. The drone footage came through choppy, distorted by wind shear. The thermal signature looked irregular, too hot for a rock shelf, too cold for a flame front. Come on, I muttered, thumbing through filter settings. I glanced at the passenger seat. Empty, of course. It had been that way for a while. Used to be Lena sitting there, tapping her boots against the floorboard while she cross-checked soil moisture maps or recited burn stats from memory like she was reading poetry. Now it was just me, the drone feed, and the stale scent of instant coffee gone cold. Outside, the ridgeline shimmered under a morning haze. The season had been dry, a record dry, according to the field logs, and the terrain looked thirsty. Juniper and cheatgrass clung to the soil like survivors. I'd driven this stretch 100 times, and yet somehow it always felt unfamiliar after a few days alone. I didn't notice the song until halfway through the third chorus. Soft, acoustic. A familiar voice on my tablet speaker, an old folk track Lena used to hum when we were camped out near Lost Horse Canyon, back when everything still felt like a shared mission instead of a silent punishment. Damn it, I whispered, hitting pause. She loved that song. Willow Wind. Said it reminded her of her mother's garden in Flagstaff. I hadn't heard it in over a year. The drone jolted on the feed. Static, then black screen. Sensor failure. Seriously. I cursed under my breath, grabbed my field pack, and stepped out into the canyon air. It was already pushing 80 degrees and not even 7 yet. The drone had dropped near a dust-caked wash a quarter-mile downhill. I found it crumpled behind a sagebrush cluster, one of the thermal nodes cracked clean in half. I dropped to a crouch and pulled out my repair kit. Dust clung to the sweat on my neck. The silence pressed in heavy. As I worked, I caught myself glancing west, toward a firebreak Lena and I mapped 2 summers ago. Back then, we were syncing sensor grids and talking about buying land near Spokane. Growing apples, maybe? Starting over. Yeah? I didn't even know where she was sleeping at night. Last I heard, she was reassigned to terrain scouting. Some joint ecology project. Probably out there somewhere, still tracing flame scars and pretending she hadn't ghosted the one person who always backed her. I tightened the last bolt on the sensor node, powered up the unit, and watched the drone blink back to life. Mission back online. But all I could think was, when did it stop feeling like a mission and start feeling like a sentence? The ash station sat like a sun-bleached tin box at the foot of Ridge 42, barely big enough for one cot, a kitchenette, and a comms relay that went offline every time it rained. I rolled in around midday, wheels crunching over gravel, hoping to grab a few lithium cells and fresh lens covers before heading back out. The first thing I saw was Lena's boots on the porch. My gut tightened. I killed the engine and stepped out, trying to play it cool, but my stomach was already tying itself in knots. The air smelled like dry pine and diesel, same as always, but it felt different. Tense. Inside, I heard her laugh. Not a big laugh, just a small, breathy one. It still hit me like a slap. She was leaning over the battery shelf, sorting through power packs like she owned the place. And right next to her was Marco, the new tech out of Ojai. Big smile, flashier drone rig than anyone needed out here, and a habit of showing up where he wasn't assigned. Didn't expect to see you here, I said, letting the screen door bang behind me. Lena glanced over her shoulder, her face a little too composed. Hey, Longview. Just running a systems check before heading out to the west slope. Marco didn't move. Got a hot ridge forming over by Flagjaw, he said. She's thinking of doing a loop scan. She's thinking, I said, I still on her. Lena straightened up, brushing dust off her pants. Just making sure my telemetry isn't lagging. Some of the units haven't synced since last week. You could have said something, I replied, voice quieter now. Would have saved you the trip. She didn't answer right away. Marco turned, pretending to check something on his tablet. But his body language was all wrong. Shoulders angled toward her, standing too close. Like this was something casual and familiar. Lena finally spoke. Didn't think it mattered. It's just equipment, right? Just equipment. Just a job. Just coincidence that she always seemed to be posted wherever Marco was. I looked around the room. The supply crates, the racks of gear. Everything felt smaller with her in it. You hiking up solo? I asked. She nodded. Unless Marco wants to tag along. Marco grinned but said nothing. I forced a shrug. Well, watch the ridgeline. Ground wind's been spinning weird this week. Thanks, she said, avoiding my eyes. I'll be careful. She slipped past me, grabbing a field tablet on the way out. The air shifted as she brushed by. Same lavender sunscreen she used to keep in the glove box. I stood there, dumbly watching the door swing closed behind her. Marco gave a low whistle. Y'all always that friendly? I didn't answer, just turned and started gathering my gear. Outside, the sun baked the truck hood. But I didn't move. I sat in the cab, gripping the wheel, watching her figure disappear into the brush line like she hadn't left a damn thing behind. Like none of it ever happened. The slope west of Flatjaw Ridge was littered with scorched pine trunks and brittle ground cover. Lena's boots crunched through blackened soil as she made her way up the trail, pack heavier than it should have been for a simple recon loop. She told herself it was about the samples, new growth, erosion, insect patterns, but she knew better. The real weight was in her chest. The drone above her buzzed low, running a pattern she'd flown 100 times. Thermal sweep, wind drift, nothing critical. Still, her pulse thumped like she was hiking into a live burn zone. She hated herself for saying yes to Marco's calm ping an hour ago. He'd messaged, "You around? Could use company on a sweep." And instead of ignoring it, she answered, "Meet you at the Overlook in 2 hours." What the hell was she doing? She stopped beside a downed log and pulled a water bottle from her hip clip. The sun bore down like judgment. In the quiet, her thoughts circled back to Owen. How stiff he'd looked standing in the station. How his voice always got low and flat when he was trying not to care. That tone still cracked something in her. God, she missed the way they used to work. The way they fit. Long field weeks full of shared glances and dumb jokes and silences that weren't awkward. Just quiet in a way only the wilderness could be. They had talked once about leaving it all behind. Starting something real. But then the grant fell through, her sister got sick. And she took that temporary field post in Boise. Everything shifted. They hadn't broken up, not really. Just stopped calling. The in-between turned into absence. And in the mess of it, Marco showed up. Flirty, easy, uncomplicated. She let herself fall into the idea of something simpler. Something that didn't make her question who she was when things got hard. But it wasn't simple. Not when Marco started showing up at her posts. Not when he asked things like, "Does he know about us?" With that smirk he thought was charming. And especially not when Owen showed up today, looking at her like she'd already told him the truth without saying a word. Lena hiked higher, the Overlook finally coming into view. A flat shelf of granite, fire-scorched at the edges, with just enough shade to make it bearable. From there, the whole basin stretched out. A scarred patchwork of green and gray. She sat down on a sun-warmed boulder, pulled off her gloves, and checked the comm unit. Marco was late. Of course he was. She leaned back, letting her head rest against the stone, and stared up at the lazy arc of her drone above. The hum of it had once comforted her, a symbol of control, of data and purpose. Now it just reminded her of how far she'd drifted. A crackle on the comm, "Yo, 10 out. That cool." She didn't answer right away. Her thumb hovered over the response button. Sure was right there. So easy. So automatic. But instead, she typed. Still deciding. She hit send and powered the unit down. No reception. No signals. Just wind and heat and a knot of guilt she couldn't swallow. For the first time in a long while, Lena wondered if she was sabotaging something that still had a chance. And if she was, why? The secondary drone base was little more than a tarp-covered trailer parked near a dry creek bed. With a few folding chairs, a battery dock, and a portable shower unit that hadn't seen a proper cleaning in weeks. Owen had come here to recalibrate a few backup sensors. Truth was, he just needed somewhere Lena hadn't been. The air was still, the kind of quiet that made your own thoughts feel louder. He kept checking the uplink panel even though he'd already run diagnostics twice. Idle hands, busy brain. He hadn't stopped thinking about her since Ash Station. Not just the way she avoided his eyes or how Marco hovered behind her like some loyal golden retriever. It was the way she walked out, like there was nothing left between them. Like the years they'd spent together out here didn't matter anymore. Back then they tracked lightning strikes by boot and compass. Shared everything from frostbitten fingers to freeze-dried dinners. Now they shared silence. And rumors. He rubbed his face hard, trying to push the thoughts out. From the side of the trailer, a voice called, "Hot day for brooding." It was Candace, the seasonal volunteer from Bend. Red ball cap, freckles, and a smirk that said she saw more than she let on. "I'm not brooding," Owen muttered, not looking up. "You're doing the thing with your jaw again," she said, sitting beside him and sipping from a sun-faded thermos. "What's her name?" Owen gave a dry laugh. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to people who've been dumped near pine trees before," she grinned. "You look like you're trying to solder your heart back together with a torque wrench." He stared ahead at the horizon. It wasn't even a clean break. It just drifted. Then she drifted towards someone else. Candace nudged him gently. "Sounds like someone needs a distraction." He turned to look at her. "That an offer?" She didn't answer right away. Just held his gaze a second longer than necessary. Then she stood up and said, "The shower's free." Owen hesitated, then stood too. Later, inside the makeshift shower stall, hot water rattling down from a tank no bigger than a backpack, Owen stared at the cracked mirror above the tiny sink. His hair was longer than he remembered. His eyes looked tired. Not just from sleep, but from trying too hard to pretend things didn't hurt anymore. Candace's hand had been warm. Her laugh was easy. But after, he felt nothing. No guilt. No relief. Just emptiness. He dried off, changed into a clean shirt, and stepped back out into the heat. Candace was gone. Just a smudge of dust where her boots had been. Back at the operations tent, Owen stared at the blinking LED on his drone panel. More routes to log. More grids to sweep. He powered up the next recon loop and buried himself in the work. But all the while, that same question thudded through his skull. What the hell am I doing? Twilight was bleeding across the canyon walls when Lena reached the overlook. Breakpoint Bluff wasn't marked on any official maps, but everyone in the field called it that. A narrow ledge of rock that jutted out above the basin, beautiful, sure, but unstable. Like a lot of things out here. Marco was already there, sitting on the edge like he didn't care about the 200-foot drop. His drone hovered lazily nearby, blinking amber in standby mode. When he saw her approach, he smiled like this was a date. "You made it," he said, scooting over to make room on the ledge. "Wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Lena said, lowering her pack but staying on her feet. "Long hike." He shrugged. "Worth it for the view." The silence stretched too long. Lena shifted, watching the last light flicker off the hills. Then she said it. "I can't do this anymore." Marco's smile faltered. "Do what?" "This," she said. "Us. Whatever this has been." He tilted his head. "You sure? We haven't exactly defined anything." "Exactly," she said, sharper now. "It's been vague on purpose. Because I didn't want to admit it was a mistake." Marco stood slowly. "Wow. Okay. Is this about Owen?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Partly. But mostly it's about me." He crossed his arms, jaw tight. "I get it. He shows up, you remember the good times, forget why you left." "I never really left," she said. We paused. "That's not the same thing." Marco laughed, but it had no humor. "You think he's been out here waiting for you?" "Come on, Lena. You don't know what he's been up to. Guys like him, they don't stay lonely long." "Maybe not," she said. "But that doesn't change what I'm feeling." Marco stepped closer. "He never made you happy, not really. You were always second-guessing yourself around him. With me, it's easier." "That's the problem," she said. "You're easy. And I've been using that to avoid facing everything I still haven't dealt with." Marco's eyes narrowed. "So what, you're just done with me?" "Yes," she said, steady now. "I'm sorry. But this ends here." He stepped back like she'd shoved him. The drone above them dipped slightly, then corrected. "You think you can just walk away clean?" Marco asked, voice low. "I'm not hiding anymore." "You sure you want to do that?" he said, too calm. "You think this place doesn't talk? Secrets don't stay buried in ash. Not forever." Lena blinked. "Is that a threat?" Marco gave a half-smile. "Just a fact." She didn't answer. She grabbed her pack and turned, hiking stick stabbing into the dust with more force than needed. Behind her, the bluff sat still under the dimming sky. But the damage was done. Whatever this had been, it was over. And for the first time in months, she didn't feel split in two. She just felt ready. The terrain past Canyon Hollow was steep and crumbly, barely passable by truck, but the new firebreak outpost needed a supply drop before sundown. Owen's rig groaned over the rocks, packed with sensor spools, coolant packs, and a replacement rotor for the damaged aerial drone stationed ahead. He hadn't slept much the night before. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lena standing in the ash station doorway looking at him like a stranger. He kept telling himself to focus. Deliver the gear. Log the route. Recharge the units. Keep moving. But thoughts of her kept looping, always ending in the same question: how much of their silence was his fault? A dry gust rattled through the canyon as he stopped to prep the final drone for the delivery. This one had been fussy all season: unstable rotors, telemetry lag, short battery life. Just like everything else lately, it was on the edge of failure. He launched it anyway. The drone wobbled in the wind, adjusted, then gained altitude. It clipped over the ridgeline, payload secured beneath it. Owen tracked it on the tablet, thumb hovering over the override in case it dipped. Hold together, he muttered, watching the live feed shake and jitter. It reached the target coordinates 5 minutes later. Just a clearing with a tarp and a blinking sensor beacon. The drone hovered, made the drop, then tilted to head back. Come on, bring it home. The return signal dropped once, twice, and then came back online just before the blackout limit. Owen let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Delivery complete. He slumped back against the truck, sweat stinging his eyes. His hands were shaking, not from exertion but from something else. Weariness. Frustration. That old ache behind his ribs that always showed up when things got personal. Because he kept going over it. Lena's long silences. The song on the tablet. Marco's grin like he'd already won something. He wanted to believe it didn't matter. But it did. It all did. Back at the mobile unit, he was checking the drone's rotors when the comms alert pinged. Incoming voice request. Origin, Lena Hargrave. Encrypted line. Priority, hi. He stared at the screen for a second before answering. Her voice crackled through, lower than usual. Hey, I need to talk. Can we meet? Owen said nothing. Please, she added. Just us. It's important. He hesitated. Where? The old overlook by Timber Notch. Before dusk. Owen looked at the horizon. Still a few hours of light left, but the shadows were already stretching long. All right, he said quietly. I'll be there. She didn't say thank you. Just ended the call with a soft click. He stood still for a long time, staring at the hills. The job was done. But the real work, whatever this conversation would be, that was still ahead. And this time, he wasn't sure which parts could be salvaged. The annual Wildfire Awareness Expo was supposed to be a celebration: new tech demos, awards, coolers full of iced Gatorade. But all Owen saw was flash and ego. Half the teams were posing in front of chrome-plated drone rigs like they were rock stars instead of wildfire grunts. He hated these things. The crowd buzzed near the demo tents where the latest high-end drones hovered in place like show dogs. Kids posed for selfies with fire helmets 2 sizes too big, and reporters clustered around a new VR fire simulation experience. Owen spotted Marco immediately. He was in front of a gleaming black rig with solar wings and a name stenciled on the side in orange: Ember Ghost. Surrounded by other techs, Marco grinned wide, playing it up like he was the future of field response. Owen's fists clenched. He didn't want a scene. Not here, not like this. But as he got closer, he saw Marco lean in toward a younger tech and say, loud enough to carry, "Gotta be careful out there. Can't trust everyone to keep their emotions separate from their data." Laughter. Owen didn't stop walking. He stepped straight into the circle. "Got something you want to say to me?" The group quieted, shifting nervously. Marco turned, eyebrows raised like he was surprised, but not really. "Easy, Longview," he said, holding up his hands. "Didn't know you were a fan of public drama." "I'm not," Owen said. "But I'm done letting you run your mouth without consequences." Marco smirked. "This about Lena? Thought we already covered that." "She's not your responsibility anymore." "Neither are you," Owen shot back. "But I've been hearing things, how you've been tailing her assignments, leaking field data to justify reassignments, using private comms on logged frequencies. You think nobody notices?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. One of the drone techs stepped back, clearly out of the splash zone. Marco's smile faded slightly. "Careful, man. You're throwing around accusations you can't prove. Then explain the telemetry patch that got scrubbed near Timber Notch last week," Owen said. "That wasn't a glitch. That was a manual wipe." Marco's jaw twitched. "You're paranoid." Owen stepped in closer. "No, I've just been quiet. There's a difference." Marco shook his head, backing off a step. "This is pathetic. You lose a girl and suddenly everything's a conspiracy." Owen didn't think. He swung. The punch cracked across Marco's cheek, sending him staggering into the Ember Ghost drone stand. The table buckled, knocking over a display screen. A stack of VR headsets crashed to the floor. People screamed. Someone yelled, "Security!" Marco came back swinging, fist connecting with Owen's jaw. They grappled, crashing into a folding tent pole and sending the structure half collapsing. Hands were grabbing, pulling, shouting from all sides. Then Lena's voice cut through the chaos. "Owen! Stop!" He froze mid-swing. Marco's shirt was in his fist. His breath came hard and shallow. Lena stepped between them, eyes wild. "You're better than this." Owen let go. Marco stumbled back, blood on his lip. "He's nuts." "No," Owen said, wiping his mouth. "I'm just done." He turned to Lena, his voice quieter now. "You should have told me the truth." "I'm telling it now," she said. Owen nodded once, stepped back, and looked at both of them. "Whatever you two were, doesn't matter anymore. I'm out." He walked off before she could answer, the crowd parting around him like smoke. He didn't know where he was going yet, but for the first time in months he wasn't stuck. The morning after the expo, Owen sat behind the wheel of his outpost truck, engine humming as the sun crept over the cracked hills. The assignment on his screen was simple: extended drone mapping across the Mojave sector. 3 weeks. Solo. No command center check-ins. No station stopovers. No shared routes. Just him, the drones, and desert. He didn't hesitate. He tapped accept and dropped the tablet onto the seat beside him. The cab was cluttered with gear, scuffed field boots, and 2 energy bar wrappers that hadn't made it to the trash. He leaned back, one arm slung over the wheel, eyes locked on the long stretch of dirt road ahead. Outside, everything was still, the kind of quiet that didn't ask for anything. He hadn't spoken to anyone since the fight. Not Marco, not Lena, and that felt okay. Not good, not fixed, but still. Owen started the engine, tires crunching over gravel as he pulled away from camp. The path ahead shimmered with heat, a mirage of the road becoming the only thing he could trust to stay consistent. In the side mirror, he caught a figure near the tree line, standing still. It was Lena. She didn't wave, didn't run, just stood there watching him go. And he didn't stop. Maybe that said everything. She had tried to reach him once more, one message the night after the fight. No apologies, no drama. Just, "I'm sorry for how it all happened, for waiting too long to say what I needed to. I'll be around if you ever want to talk." He hadn't replied. Not because he hated her, not even because he didn't miss her, but because some things needed time. And he wasn't sure either of them had given that enough space to do what it needed to do. The truck rumbled past the last familiar ridgeline, and the signal bars on the comm tablet dropped to 0. Perfect. He liked the silence now. It didn't feel like punishment anymore. At least out here things were honest. The land didn't lie to you. It burned, it broke, it healed on its own time. You either kept up or you didn't. Behind him, the past flickered like a smoke trail in the rearview mirror. Unresolved, but not unsaid. Far across camp, in a weathered canvas tent, Lena sat on her cot, legs tucked up, her tablet resting on her knees. She watched his signal disappear from the tracking grid, a small blue blinking out just west of the state line. In her hand was a photo, bent at the corner, edges soft from wear. Her daughter at 5, standing beside a Forest Service sign, beaming, cheeks smudged with dirt. Lena whispered, "No more running," and slipped the photo back into her journal. Outside her tent, life stirred again. Trail crew prepping for day routes, a radio crackling updates, coffee boiling over a propane stove. She stood, stretched, and picked up her pack. They were moving in different directions now. But maybe, for the first time, they were both finally going the right way.